I mean, it's just a snake. How smart can they be? Look at its little tiny head. Can it even fit a brain in there? The answer is yes, it can. A little tiny brain that's actually really smart. It is just a snake, but believe it or not, you can train them. Welcome to the Green Room. I'm Bob Bledsoe. Today we're talking about several different forms of snake training. Some accidental training or conditioning, and some intentional, like target training. My brother Kent, our cameraman, for example, is target trained. I'm not target trained. I don't even know what that is, and I guess it's lunchtime. I'll be outside. Wait, Kent, it's not lunch. We're in the middle of filming this. Oh, yeah, right. I don't know what I was thinking. Sorry. I practiced on Kent before trying it out on the snakes. You didn't practice anything on me. What are you even talking about? And I'm starving! Training reptiles is a fairly new concept within the world of keepers, but zoos do it all the time. You know, zoos don't typically have animals that are handleable, so they'll target train any animal to move to where it needs, where they need it to be for, maybe a veterinary check or something like that. And that includes reptiles. There are people in the world of keeping and research like Lori Torini of Behavior Education at the Spirit Equine Sanctuary that are doing some really cool work with training snakes, and we're going to talk about her and her channel later once we get more into target training. But let's talk about ways that we accidentally train our snakes. Because snakes process things so differently than mammals do, it's difficult for us to measure their intelligence. And it's easy to just say, well, a snake pretty much goes on instinct and there's not much else going on up there. But really, we accidentally train our snakes all the time. The first thing that comes to mind when I think about like sort of accidental training or conditioning is just getting your snake used to you. When you go into an enclosure of a new snake, they might be fearful and striking. And if every time they strike at you, you close their enclosure and leave, they learn really quickly that that behavior works. But if you do the opposite, you sort of ignore the strike and just pick them up from behind, they realize really quickly that all the effort they put into striking and doing that big display doesn't really work with a human. And also, they start to get conditioned to learn that you're actually not a bad person. You're not going to hurt it. And that's a form of training. There are some bigger breeders that talk about on feeding day, when they start opening and closing tubs to drop rodents in for feeding day, the snakes that are right above or right below that haven't been fed yet know that food's coming because of that opening and closing of the tubs right around them, which is pretty cool accidental training. If you have a snake that likes to come out of their enclosure either for handling or just wandering around, you'll find that your snake eventually will be trained to come up to the front of their enclosure when those lights turn on and you start moving around the room. So there are all kinds of ways that we unintentionally train snakes just based on how we interact with them and what our habits are. So let me know in the comments if there's one that I didn't think of that you've experienced with your snakes where they get accustomed to something and act a certain way because of something that you did. There is one bit of intentional training that keepers have been doing for a really long time that works well, and that's hook training. If you have a snake, usually it's done with bigger snakes. I mentioned this, I think, in my last video, that if you have a Burmese python or a reticulated python, or just any snake that has a really strong food drive, you can train it with a hook. You can take a hook or anything that's kind of long that doesn't have a heat signature, and whenever you go into that enclosure, you just rub the back of the snake. You don't have to tap it, but you just touch the snake with something that doesn't have a heat signature, and that quickly lets the snake know that they're not being fed, and then you can safely move around inside their enclosure and change their water or whatever. That's a pretty easy thing to do for a snake, to hook train them. It basically pulls them out of feeding mode, and it tells them, oh, it's not the butler, it's just the maid service. If we can hook train a snake, we can train them to do other things. Watch this. Molly, sit, shake, shake. Well, she's not up for it today. That's embarrassing. I'm kidding, obviously. There are limits, and we have to be working within the snake's natural behaviors. The difficult thing with training a snake is they have to be motivated to learn something. And you know, with hook training, we're teaching them not to do something. We're teaching them, don't bite me when I come into the enclosure to change your water or whatever. And basically we're saying, hey, Mr. Snake, you like to be lazy, right? Well, don't bother exerting any effort by sinking your teeth into anything here, because when you feel this tap, you're not getting fed. And I guess we're relying on their motivation to be lazy in that training scenario, where they can just sit there in their coil. They know that there's not going to be any food, so they don't have to move, and we can work with whatever we're doing in their enclosure. I don't hook train my snakes, by the way. There's no need to with any of my ball pythons. You may have a ball python that needs hook training, but most of them don't. And I am target training my reticulated python instead of hook training her. And I've talked about that in another video, but we'll look at that again. Hey everybody, Future Bob here. So my first Green Room Pythons upload was December 6th, 2020. This video is coming out December 6th, 2021. This is my 1-year anniversary on YouTube. And this was going to be just like a 1-year experiment. I was thinking, you know, I'm going to try to upload a video every single week, be really consistent, and we'll see what happens. We'll see if I decide to continue after a year. So will I continue? Find out next week. Or I'll just tell you now. Yes, I'll continue. Thanks to you all, the viewers. Really appreciate everybody viewing and hitting the like button and making the comments and supporting me that way. And the Patreon supporters who are supporting me on Patreon now, so that we can continue growing this channel and doing some cool stuff. And I can continue doing this every week, because believe it or not, there are other things that I do during the week that take up a lot of my time. But man, do I love making these videos and working with snakes. Look at these people. Look at these fancy ones in the flaming beard tier. If you're interested in supporting via Patreon, just go to patreon.com/greenroompythons. Regardless of the tier that you're in on there, I really appreciate your support. And for those of you who are just clicking on the videos and watching them and enjoying them, I really appreciate that support too. Thanks so much. Now, training a dog is much different than training a snake. This is McKenna, and when I want to hang out with an animal that loves me back, she's my go-to. I'm no expert dog trainer or snake trainer, but I know that McKenna is highly motivated by treats. I taught her how to stand up, lay down, shake in just a few sessions, because we have little tiny treats and we can do a session and she can try the move 20 times. She's very motivated by treats. Aren't you? Do you like treats? Yeah, you do? Dog hair on me now? I got dog hair all over me now. Ah, dog hair. You never have to do this with scales, right? It's never like, oh, I held my snake, now I have scales all over me. So it's a lot different with a snake, because you can't give them 20 treats in one sitting, right? They eat once every week or 2 weeks or 3 or 4 weeks, and you can still train them with food, but it just takes a lot longer. There are other types of training, though, that you can do, and that I've done with at least one of my snakes, that doesn't require food, because there are other motivators. So let's talk about that. As you may have seen in my last video, Lydia Dietz here is highly motivated to explore. And snakes are hardwired to find little dark spaces to explore, and Lydia Dietz is no different. So when she comes out of her tub in the rack, she immediately sees another tub, and she can go into the rack and behind that tub if she wants to. That's very enticing to her, but I don't want her to go back there. So I've trained her to not do that. Now we're talking about training a snake not to do something again, but I'm using her motivation to want to be out and exploring. So what I did is I would just sit next to her tub on the floor, and as soon as she tried to go into the rack, I would gently pull her out and put her back in her tub. And I wouldn't shut the tub. I'm just kind of resetting her. So she would come out and she'd try to go into the rack again, and I'd gently pull her out and set her back in her tub. It's a reset. She always goes back to home. It's almost like a warp in a video game, you know? But not like Super Mario Brothers, where you warp and you go to different levels. She would warp back to her home. Or what's that called? Teleport, I guess? It teleports her back to her tub. And she would have to start over. So it didn't take very long. It's, you know, several days of doing this, and then occasionally a reminder here and there. But now she will poke her head in, and I'll let her do that. I'll watch her as she pokes her head in, and then she'll stop and come right back out. And then she'll go to the next level, poke her head in, stop, and come right back out. Because she knows that if she goes in there, she just ends up back in her tub. And it's not like a punishment, like you're punishing the animal. Oh, you're grounded, now you can't explore. Because I'm leaving the tub open. She's just learned that if she moves into the back of the rack, that just leads to her tub again. And that's not where she's trying to go. So now she doesn't do it anymore. Now what she does is just climb up to the top of the rack and knocks all my stuff off of there. I haven't figured out how to train her to have respect for other people's property, but if I figure that one out, I'll let you know. By the way, Echo is getting the same type of training that Lydia here got, where I'm training her not to go somewhere. She likes to crawl on the top of these doors. All the way in the top, she can get across there and across here. And I don't want her to do that because eventually that will lead her somewhere that I don't want her to go. So what I've been doing, that's a lot harder. With Lydia, I can just pick her up and put her back in her tub. And I can barely reach the top of these. It's a struggle to reach her when she's up there. So what I do is I just encourage her to turn around and move the other direction. I'll start to pull her off a little bit, and then she'll turn around and move back towards her ladder. So it's kind of a situation of, if you don't want to be messed with up there, don't climb across to to these doors, and I won't mess with you. The other bit of trouble there is that with Lydia, she was doing it every single time. That was the first place she would go is in the back of the rack. And with Echo, she doesn't do that all the time. She only does it occasionally. So I have to wait until she does the behavior to try to teach her not to do it. So it's going to take a while, but I think she'll eventually learn not to crawl across the top of those doors. On to target training. If you really want to learn about target training, I recommend that you find Lori Torini's YouTube channel. Her whole channel is based on training snakes, specifically target training, snake behavior, all kinds of really interesting stuff. So I recommend that you check that out. But I wanted to target train my super dwarf reticulated python as soon as I put the order in for Echo and I knew she was coming. I went, okay, I want to target train this snake as an alternative to hook training her, just in case she has a standard reticulated python food response, which she has a good food response, but I've never been in danger of being bit by that little girl. But anyway, target training her has been fun. But so in researching this, I pretty much was just watching Lori Torini's videos to learn about this. And I realized really quickly that I could also target train some of my more food motivated ball pythons. And I wanted to do that as an experiment. But also, I think it's cool to be able to just pull them out of that food instinct mode and get them thinking before they take a meal. And I think that's a cool thing to do. So I've got two different targets. I've got this one for Echo that I use and this one for the ball pythons. So this isn't going to work for a snake that's not super food motivated. And like I mentioned before, you can use target training, with other motivators, but specifically with food, it's only going to work if you've got a really well motivated snake. So some ball pythons it'll work for, and others it won't. Most reticulated pythons is going to work for. Most other kind of snakes it'll work if they're super food motivated. Now, if you go to Lori's channel, you'll find that her snakes will follow her target everywhere. She'll have them do little obstacle courses, all kinds of cool stuff. At this point with my snakes, I'm just having them follow the target and touch it with their nose to get a food reward. So for Echo, she's got her little target, and the reason that I'm using this is eventually I'm going to have her follow this, and then I'll turn it this way, and that'll mean to stop on it and pause for food. So we've got different steps in this, but for right now, she's just following it, and then she touches it with her nose or her tongue, and she gets a food reward. Same with the ball pythons. They follow this little green ball. By the way, snakes can see blue and green, so that's why I've chosen these two different colors for them. Delilah gets so excited about food that she oftentimes will strike the front of her tub. I don't want her to do that, so one of the reasons I wanted her target trained is I want her to know that she's not getting fed unless she sees that target. And sometimes she strikes at the target, which is not cool, but I just let her calm down and start thinking, and then as soon as she moves towards it and touches it with her tongue or her nose, she'll get food. But it takes her a little while sometimes to think about this and to do what she needs to do before she gets fed. I realized I had 1 week to get footage of target training, and none of the snakes happened to do very well with the target this week. You know, sometimes they'll follow it all over, and sometimes they take forever, and this was a week that sort of took forever. Also, apparently I don't know how to set my camera for low lighting or anything like that. Obviously, Kent is not willing to film while snakes are eating, so it was up to me, and sorry about the too dark and too light when I had McKenna. It's just, you know, when I edit these things, I look back at past Bob and I think, man, what a bonehead, you know? So the way you start a snake out on target training is you just pair the target with the food. And I think Lori Torini started target training because she realized that one of her snakes was recognizing the plate that she would put the food item on, and the snake would go to the plate before there was even food on there, and she realized that that's a target, basically. So make your target the plate, essentially. Just put the rat with it and feed your snake. In making this video, I realized that I should start Tiger Lily on target training because she's very food motivated. So here's the first try of just showing her the target and then giving her food. So I'll do this for a while, and eventually she'll start to associate this target with food, and that's when I can start getting her to do my bidding. Wink. Hey, Kent's Corner! Cut to Kent's Corner right now! Okay, Kent, yes, fine. Kent's Corner, you guys, I guess. You guys, Bob has gone crazy. He is building an army of snakes. I mean, welcome to Kent's Corner, the most fun you'll ever have looking at the internet. Anyway, I know he's my brother and all, but he's got these deadly pythons in there, and he has become power hungry. He is training snakes to be his minions so he can rob banks. Kent, if I was actually amassing snake minions to do my bidding, I think I would do cooler stuff than rob banks. If I had a highly trained snake army, I'd probably be like a world domination type villain. See, you guys, this is exactly what I was talking about. He admits it. And can we order Burger King? Because several Whoppers would really hit the spot right now. I am famished. Can we be done with Kent's Corner? Yeah. Thanks for watching Kent's Corner, everybody's favorite corner of the house. So the whole point of this video is to say that engaging a snake's brain is a really good bit of enrichment. You know, they do run most of their lives off of instinctual instinct. But getting them into thinking mode and problem solving is a really cool thing to do for your snake. Snakes are a lot smarter than we give them credit for. And you know what? Maybe Kent is too. See? Mom was right. Thanks for helping out the channel by hitting that like button below the video. There's also a subscribe button down there if you haven't hit that already. Appreciate that. And I'll see you guys next week. Three? I said several. Several's between 4 and 6. Guess I'll have to eat 2 lunches.